The nights of a full moon are always special in the Florida Everglades forest that is home to the eagles of Spring Creek. On those nights, when the moon would start to set in the west before sunrise, the effect is eerie yet beautiful. Of course, I know they can fly by moonlight, and much less than that, with their keen eyesight. I'm waiting in a swampy area in the cool pre-dawn air of Florida's winter. What I don't know is, will I see them, let alone photograph them? And then I hear them. The Everglades in South Florida is a photographer's dream, especially in terms of the diversity of the birds. Interesting birds are everywhere. And birds are not the only interesting wildlife, by the way. The photographer has an almost endless choice of birds to photograph in this region, from the birds along the coastlines to the birds in the forests and the mangroves, from birds in flocks to birds that are more loners. And then there are the eagles, especially the majestic bald eagles. It's the sounds of the birds that you first notice in the early morning in the Everglades forest that is home to the eagles of Spring Creek. But then when you hear the eagles themselves, their cries echoing throughout the forest, you know you're hearing something special. The eagles chose a near-perfect spot to make their nest, right next to Spring Creek, an abundance of other waterways, and of course, fish. From the nest among the tall trees, the eagles had an almost ideal fishing location, and they certainly took advantage of it. The immediate forested area adjacent to Spring Creek, that I call Spring Creek Forest, is not huge, but it's certainly large enough for a number of very tall trees, including the tree that houses the eagle's main nest. The nest itself is quite large. Some people have said that it's as big as a compact car. And the nest has vantage points for the eagles looking east, west, north, and south. The eagles also have other small forested areas nearby. Of course, their flying range is tremendous, so they can basically go for miles and come back. But with the plentiful food around, they really don't have to. I like these pictures in the sunset. And of course, the birds are most active in the early morning and at sunset. You never tire, at least I've never tired, of looking at these beautiful birds, these eagles. These eagles are part of a giant ecosystem of thousands of square miles in South Florida. Much of this ecosystem is populated, especially along the coasts, but much of it still remains wild. The eagles themselves found the Spring Creek Forest and made their nest there, and the forest itself is not far from populated areas. But it is a perfect area for them to fish at Spring Creek and to live. And here you can see the nest on the far left, and their overlook tree is on the right. The first year that I saw Spring Creek, its forest, and the eagle's nest, it was in mid-February, and the eagles had had 2 babies about a month before. A year before that, the eagles had also had babies, and one of them had lived. But unfortunately, these babies did not live out the season, and the eagles left the nest that summer. But they did return in the fall, and I started photographing them regularly. And then one evening I was scouting around the area near Spring Creek Forest and was very fortunate to see the young eagle that had been born 2 years prior and had survived, and you can see its partial development as an immature bald eagle. But by the fall, the eagles were looking forward, not backward. When they returned to the nest, they were enhancing the nest, bringing sticks into the nest and tidying it up. Sometimes both eagles were in the nest, then one would leave the nest for a few minutes and go look for a stick or something and bring it back, as you see here. This went on all the time. This scene was repeated, believe me, in the morning, evening, sometimes during the day. I was able to get some nice still pictures of these eagles carrying sticks and such into the nest. This is one of my favorite photos. And I was very fortunate one evening to picture the eagle with the American flag in the foreground near a park. The nest building continued into October and November. It was an intense period of activity for the eagles, especially in the mornings. I love this shot of the wingspan. But the eagles did have time to relax in the afternoons and evenings. As we got into late November and early December, the activity changed from nest building to starting to mate, frankly. There was more flying around, more calling out for each other. Here I had one camera fixed on the nest, and I used my photo camera to capture the female eagle's flight over to the lookout tree, which was one of their favorite mating habitats. You can see the male very excited at this point.